Hello and welcome to another of our Aziz Podcast. Today we're exploring purpose-driven leadership, how leaders can find real meaning in their work, stay human, and lead with impact even in complex, fast-changing environments. I'm delighted to be joined by two incredible coaches, Caroline Hughes and Jeremy Keeley, who bring unique perspectives on this topic. Caroline became a global director at the age of 39, has led major transformations and leadership development initiatives across multinational organizations. She brings deep experience in building talent frameworks, inclusion and diversity, and supporting senior executives to lead with purpose while maintaining well-being. Caroline, anything I've missed out here? Would you like to add anything?
No, I think sometimes I don't recognize myself when I hear these bios. I think you captured it all perfectly. Thank you.
And now to Jeremy. He has over 20 years' experience in leadership development, coaching, and business transformation across industries worldwide. He works with leaders at all levels, from startups to C-suite teams, helping them navigate complexity and lead sustainably, bringing humanity into their work. Have I missed anything out, Jeremy?
No, that sounds perfect, Kelly. Thank you.
Good. Well, we're going to be talking about what purpose really looks like in leadership and how love and empathy play a role. You didn't think that was going to be covered, did you? Also, how leaders can stay grounded when everything around them feels chaotic. So let's kick off. We'll talk about purpose as a buzzword in leadership, but shall we just get a couple of definitions from each of you and what it actually looks like when purpose does drive the way someone leads? Caroline, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, I think purpose is a word that's kind of bandied around a lot at the moment, isn't it? And it can mean loads of things to loads of people. I like to kind of pull it back to its most simplest form. And, for me, purpose is about being clear in what you're about, kind of really simple. And I think purpose can come about in two ways. You can borrow somebody else's purpose. So, you see that in organizations where there's a clear mission statement, and that can become a personal purpose if that's in alignment with something that you feel you kind of drawn to. And I think the second one is the purpose you discover within yourself. And very often that's the voice you try to ignore for a very long time because it seems too simple. And we try to complicate it. So I kind of start there with purpose.
Very good. Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. I agree with everything you just said. For me, it's consistent clarity across the organisation about what has real meaning. So you can actually feel it in an organisation when there's purpose-built leaders and something that everybody can rely on. If a leader leads with purpose, and then what you hear in the organisation at a very practical level are conversations about meaning and impact, rather than just KPIs and strategies and what we've got to do next. It's much, much more wide and possibility rather than just, okay, but keep grinding. So for me, that's the very practical element of it.
Caroline, can you give us some examples of purpose in action, what it looks like to you?
Yeah, well, if we kind of follow Jeremy's thread of if it's clear at the top of the organization, then it becomes a conversation starter for everything that happens. So, for example, if a company's purpose is around delivering growth, or a company's purpose is around doing good in the world, then everything that happens in the organization gets hooked into that objective. And very often I've seen that if you can't create a very clear and deliberate hook that a 5-year-old could understand, there's no budget available. There's no appetite for the discussion available because actually the kind of the red thread is missing. And otherwise you have a set of people going off in all kinds of directions, very often doing really good and meaningful work, but it's not in alignment with what it is the organization actually wants to do. So when we see that top to bottom alignment from whether it's the CEO or the MD, right down to the janitor, the coffee maker, who are really clear, I'm here, like NASA, I'm here to put the man on the moon. When you have that level of clarity and that real bite-sized chunk that allows everybody to understand it, then that's what it looks like in action. And then that's where you can get into a conversation about greater meaning.
It's a bit like the story, isn't there, about the Jack Kennedy visiting Cape Canaveral, as it was.
That's
there.
right.
And he saw this chap sweeping up, and he immediately, being a Democrat, he went straight over to him, shook his hand, and said, "What do you do here?" He said, "Me, I helped launch space rockets." And he's brushing away. And that's probably somebody who was received with the purpose of what he was actually doing.
Yeah.
But these are, back in the 1960s, that was one thing, but these are very tough times now for leaders and chaotic, and it's quite hard to keep up with the notion of purpose. What they say is that it's very hard to drain the swamp when you're up to your neck in alligators. What are you saying now? Because you're coaching a lot of leaders, as I am, in situations where everything's fast moving, everything's not necessarily moving in the direction you would want. How can you keep people focused on the purpose?
I think sorry, Jeremy, go ahead.
No, you go. Go on. Yeah.
I was going to say it kind of begins with maybe not seeing complexity as a problem to be solved. Because I think complexity is the way of the world now. We operate at a faster pace. We have greater access to information than we've ever had. We have AI tools that can do some of the thinking for us. But actually, when we begin to look at complexity as part of a human ecosystem, then we shift the dialogue that we're able to have. You introduced the topic earlier, Khaled, kind of talking about, introducing love and humanity into the organization ecosystem. And it's kind of a risky thing to do, which is a scary statement in and of itself. But I think where leaders can access empathy and they can be deeply self-aware, then it allows them to have a conversation about what is the impact of navigating this complexity? How do we do it in a sustainable way that delivers the results and the outcomes that we would like to have, but also that doesn't kind of wear our people out in the doing of it?
Jeremy, we'll continue this. We must talk of love now. Tell us what that actually means, love in the workplace. I mean, a lot of that is banned now, of course. But
well,
it's
you've got
not
to be,
quite
yeah,
the same
obviously,
thing, is it?
depending on what love means, of course. By the way, I'd finish, one of the things I'd just finish off with what Caroline was saying. I agree with you completely. But for me, the way to really make it work is to make absolutely sure your conversations and your actions as leaders are always consistent with the stated purpose of the organisation. That's the best way in which you engage the organisation around purpose, in my view. And if you can't be consistent, then you've got to explain really clearly why you're not being consistent. But yeah, from a love perspective, kind of why? So for me, love in leadership means focusing genuinely on, with really good intention for the world, if you like. So including sustainability, planet, etc. But for the organisation, for the, if you like, the real customers, the ultimate customers of the organisation, or whether that be patients, for example, or whoever, but also mostly for its people. So you're really focusing on the good and doing that all the time. So then, with good intention. So that's kind of, if you like, a definition of love. You can see it when you see deep levels of trust in the organisation and conversations about, and come back to consistency of behaviour, a consistency of care, straight conversations. For me, it's where you hear straight conversations without judgment. It's kind of, this is the issue, this is what we need to resolve. Because if you really care about somebody, you can have very straight conversations if they know you really care about them and in the organisation. And then stories and feelings of being enabled, supported, challenged without judgment. So, and these are the kind of practical things I've noticed in organisations where leaders, or in systems where leaders bring genuine love.
Yes,
Does that
and
make sense?
I find myself saying to some of my clients, it's all about BLT, which is not bacon, lettuce, and tomatoes. It's actually, do they believe you? Then if they believe you, they might just like you. And if they like you enough, then they might trust you. And it's about being able to go through those things and constantly underpinning somebody's opinion of you by making sure you're saying things that are believable, you don't let them down. Or if you can't tell them the answer to something, you don't flannel, you say, I don't know the answer. There's nothing wrong with not knowing, is there? And all those sorts of things. Caroline, anything to add? I mean, examples of love in some of your clients.
Yeah, I remember running a leadership program a number of years ago, and we premised this section with, we're going to use a 4-letter word. It might not be one you hear a lot around here. They were expecting a certain word, and judging by your reaction, Khalid, so are you. And we started to talk about love. And the first reaction of the leaders present was, we can't talk about that. We actually can, because we don't have love for ourselves, and love doesn't belong in the workplace. It's as if we kind of switch off our human being and we become the human doer in service of an outcome. And that to show emotion of any description is actually, a sign of weakness. And I love Brené Brown's kind of, clear is kind definition. And it kind of speaks to what you're both talking to here, that when we can approach a situation with empathy, because very often empathy is the demonstration of love, isn't it, within an organization context? Because we've got to take it out of its romantic wrapper And we've got to bring it into a more kind of mainstream conversation, which is more about showing up with, I know you're the person who normally delivers, and I'm noticing something different in your behavior or in the delivery, or maybe perhaps not having met a deliverable that was seen to be either an easy win for them. And when we approach that situation from what we would call love in this conversation, but even with a seek first to understand mindset, to go back to Stephen Covey, that's where we're just reaching across the aisle to somebody else to be open, to come forward with their context so that we can better understand and seek a way forward. But it means as a leader, we very often have to give up needing to be right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's almost the biggest barrier to this greater kind of more human organization that we're talking about. Because we kind of come from that old mindset of there's a hierarchy and there's somebody with a big desk, even if the desk is now gone, who knows the answer, who's kind of got it together, wears the suit and the collar and tie or the shoulder pads, whatever it is.
Yeah.
To step out of the armor of that into something that is a bit more edgy, because maybe it feels more vulnerable, because as you said, Khalid, you don't know all the answers and we've got to get okay with that. Then that's where I really see the rubber hit the road, and where actually the conversation about love is very helpful, because it's not about the right and wrong of things. It's not about who knew or who didn't. It's actually about separating fact from story.
You reminded me that one of the crucial elements of a really successful team, in my view, is that they call unhelpful behaviour compassionately. So they call the unhelpful behaviour, but they do it in a way, exactly as you said, Karen, which is, actually, I know you didn't really mean this. What's really going on for you?
Yeah.
And love is also a bit of, I often talk about the concept of political capital. You keep building up your political capital with a small p by offering empathy and stuff, so that when things get a bit tougher, you've got some political capital to spend, because people they trust you again. I must remember from my days in the media, when I was a junior reporter with the BBC, I remember going to interview he was called Chief General Manager. They didn't call them chief executives in those days, but he was the Chief General Manager of the Halifax Building Society in Halifax. And I don't know whether you've ever seen their building, but it's the most remarkable building. It looks like a ship coming down the main street of Halifax. It's perfect. It was purpose built, and it was built, I'll tell you how long ago it was, in the days when they needed to hold the physical deeds of your house on which they'd given you a mortgage. So the whole building was built around this document delivery system, which would look very archaic now, but it was state of the art at the time, and everybody's watching these sort of files whizzing around, physically whizzing around. And this chief general manager I always remember, he was sort of a silver-haired fox, he's called Albert Fair. And he said, let's go walk around and keep the camera running if you want to. And he paused by every desk. He did a lot of management by walking about. And his phrase was, how are you doing? Because the answer to that is always okay. But he actually had a different phrase. He used to say, are we doing business? And what sort of business are we doing? And that gets people. But it's still focusing. And it's not too challenging. It's just basically saying, how are you doing? But it's in a way that the purpose was doing business, which means if your job was shifting this piece of paper to that piece of paper, or doing something else on checking a conveyance or whatever it might be, he was giving people an opportunity to talk about themselves. So I always thought he was a very loving guy, although I didn't realize it at the time, but he was a good fellow. And that's years ago when I did several series on Channel 4 about half-hour interviews with leaders in industry, people like Sir John Harvey Jones and people like that. In those days, Alan Shepard, the Diageo guy. And I always remember people being asked, would I write a book about what these leaders all had in common? And I didn't really know, because they're always very different. But what I realized was they were really engaged and in an empathetic way. They weren't just numbers people. And when I'm coaching people on succession, from being, for example, a CFO wants to be a CEO, and that's always a leap, but we've got a lot of ex-CFOs and CEOs. I'm always saying you've actually got to grow some empathy around you, because it's not all about the numbers now. John Harvey Jones famously said, if it was all about the numbers, you wouldn't need people. All you need is a big computer to feed the numbers into and get the answers you want. But that's not the case at all. So love, okay, we've got to have love in the situation. What else needs to happen? I suppose there's still this complexity thing and emotional connection. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Some examples from suitably anonymized from your own client base, where we talked a bit about when things are calling out difficulties, but in a
I've got
yes,
one,
Jeremy.
Which formed my career actually back in '92, working with power stations, coal-fired power stations, in just after privatisation of the coal industry, and all of the theory at the time was that coal-fired power stations would last 5 years. They were going to be replaced by gas-fired. And of course, they were all based in areas of the country where coal mines were, and in that time, coal mining industry had been destroyed. And so I worked with a general manager of the power station, where we were working with reducing, having to close the power station with 5 years, but also reducing costs by about 30% almost immediately over the next 6 months or so. I'll name the first name, Derek, who ran it. It was a new job. He'd never done it before, experienced chemist. And when we actually got to it, the two of us running together, we actually got to the point where we thought, okay, who do they trust the most? They trust the unions, even though the unions are really radical. Let's get the unions fully on board with us. Second of all, these people are going to be made redundant eventually into the poorest parts of the country. And how the hell do we manage that? Not how do we manage the cost reduction? And so we came up with a program which genuinely moved towards the utter commitment that Derek put forward was, it was called Securing Our Future. Even though we knew the power station was going to close, actually it was every single person who leaves this power station will be better off than they are now, much more, not financially, but much more likely to find another job. And that's what we're going to be committed to, and stuck with it for 6 months. And in fact, I can't name the power station, but that power station still operates. It's no longer a coal-fired power station. It was going to close.
By wood pellets now.
Yeah, it's a completely different renewable energy, but it could have easily closed properly within the 5 years. Amazing. For me, that was probably the demonstration of genuine love and leadership related to purpose. And by the way, really complex at the time.
We're coming to the end of our podcast, but I just wonder, everybody will say it's all very well, this is typical coach speak, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. We're up to our neck in alligators. So some tips. When you're under pressure and you're a leader, how do you stick to this leading with purpose? How do you do that, Caroline?
So I think it begins with connecting deeply with who you are and how does purpose apply to you as a person. Because particularly when times are tough and your people are looking to you for leadership, for direction, for surety, if you're just reading something that's on a wall, but that is not really embodied in the way in which you act consistently every day, you're going to really have a challenge in that time. Now, what great leaders do, of course, is they use crisis to their advantage, and they use that kind of as their capstone to really access that inner X factor we know we have, but it rarely gets tested until times are tough. So I say step one, what is true for you relative to the purpose of your organization? Get really clear and get consistent. And if you don't know what it is, start looking at the way in which you make decisions and the way in which you collaborate, because your actions are going to tell you exactly what it is. Otherwise, other people are going to write the script for you based on how you're showing up. So that would be my very kind of top tip to keep it simple for today.
Jeremy, finish us off with
I agree. I build on that, Caroline. I would say the first thing you do is notice it. If you haven't noticed that you've lost your purpose, then so notice it, and then do not overly punish yourself, but get on with it. Tap into why you are here really, which is, I think, very consistent with what you're saying, Caroline, and then keep going. Pick up the pieces, come back into the game. Just keep it. Just go again. Just keep it going, basically.
Well, thank you, Caroline and Jeremy, for such an insightful discussion. Purpose-driven leadership isn't just a concept. It's about the choices we make. It's also about the values and the humanity we show every day. So that was good stuff, really. I hope you enjoyed that. So take a moment to reflect. What's your real purpose, and how do you actually turn that into your leadership? And how can you do more of it to reflect better on the way you lead? If you like this, subscribe to our Aziz podcast and catch our next episode on sustainable leadership And don't forget to visit our website, www.azizcorp.com, for more insights from our coaching community. Until the next time, goodbye.